Last week, I broke down a perfect starting strat in a game of Truth CTF. If you haven't seen that video, you should. I've linked it below. This starting strat led to a flag cap in less than 30 seconds. In less than a minute, they capped 2 flags, and in under 2 minutes, they won the game. Now, a perfect starting strat is a great way to start a game, maybe get that first flag cap, but if you want to actually win the game, your team needs to have amazing map control and spawn awareness. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to break down the rest of this game, and we're going to talk spawns. I'll start by giving you as much general info as I can about spawns that you can apply to not only Truth, but other maps as well. So for CTF, spawns are very simple in Capture the Flag. You and your team can only spawn on your side of the map. So blue players can only spawn on the blue side of the map. To be more specific, there's 4 general spawn locations on Truth. You've got under the base, the top of the base, the pink side of the map, so out here on Pink Street, and you've got car side of the map, which could be either outside the car door or behind the car bubble. And of course, this rule applies for all maps with Capture the Flag. So real quick, if we were playing on Coliseum, let's say, it's the same thing. Your teammates can only spawn on your side of the map, and you got 4 general locations. You've got in the base, so back of the base or just on top of the base here, the bottom of the base, the elbow, and then of course the cave side. Now, if you were to play a different game type, like Slayer or Strongholds, then you're no longer restricted to your side of the map. You can now spawn on the red side, for example, as well. The way you can think of spawns in these game types is it kind of works like a pizza crust around the map. So if I take this camera and I just fly through this map in a circle, like this is all potential spawn location, basically. This whole outer area, you could potentially spawn here. With some limitations. Normally what the game will do is it's not typically going to spawn you in like open spaces on these outskirts areas. So instead of spawning me here, it'll probably, put me here where I got a little bit more cover in front of me. And you also won't spawn in the very top of the map on the perimeter as well. So you're never going to see a guy spawn right in the middle of car 2, as far as I know, or right in the middle of P2. I don't think you can ever see that. You can see a car 1 spawn, which I have seen before, and whether or not you get a car 1 spawn or a P2 spawn, this it depends on a number of factors, and these are things that we can touch on, whether or not players are blocking spawns, where people are, but generally speaking, if you want to know how the spawns work, just think of it like a pizza crust. So you'll get people spawning in the bubbles, you get people on the other side of the bubble, you get them in the bases, on pink side, and etc. So like I said, in CTF, there's 4 main spawn locations. You've got pink side, bottom base, top base, and car side. Fun fact, there's actually 1 more location players can spawn, and it's very rare that this happens. I call it a fail-safe spawn point. It's the front of the base. It is possible to spawn in the front of the base, and typically this only happens if all 4 of the other locations are being blocked in some way, and the game thinks it's unsafe to spawn anyone in these locations, so it throws you out in front of the base instead. Now, very rare that this happens, and it only happens if these spawns are blocked. So how do you block spawns? How do you influence spawns? Let's talk about that. Thankfully, spawns in Halo 5 are very consistent and very reliable. There's 3 main things that will influence spawns in this game. 1 is player location, 2 is weapon use, so things like gunfire and explosions, and 3 is line of sight. So first, player location. Your enemies will never spawn right beside you in this game unless all other spawns are blocked. So it can happen, usually happens in CTF because there's less spawn locations, but typically your opponent will never spawn anywhere near you. If anything, your opponent should always spawn as far from you as possible. That's the first thing the spawn system will try to do. So, for example, if I'm on P3, the spawn location, if nothing else is happening on the map, the spawn location for my opponent will be either behind the car bubble or somewhere over near the car door, as far as possible from me. And it'll be that car bubble, right? The blue side, and not the the red side, because this is the farthest possible location from where I'm standing over on P3. If I'm standing here in the bubble, the spawn location is going to be red side pink. That's the farthest location from where I'm standing. If I'm standing up in blue bubble, it's going to be blue side. Sorry, if I'm standing in red bubble, it's going to be blue side pink. If I'm top mid, depending on what section of top mid I'm on, I'm going to get a different result. If I'm here on top mid, they're going to spawn over red side pink. If I'm here on top mid, it's going to be blue side pink. If I'm so much as looking into red base, trying to shoot somebody in red base, but standing here, they're going to spawn directly behind me. This is really important in the 2v2 game type because there are times where you'll have somebody on a red side spawn and you're fighting him from top mid, and his opponent or his teammate who previously died spawns up directly behind you and then shoots you for free in the back. And you would only know this if you know how the distance can influence spawns. So it's always the farthest distance from where you're standing is where the spawn system will want to spawn the enemy if nothing else is happening in the map. So player location is the first criteria. Then you have weapon use. So nade explosions, gunshots, all those things block spawn points. So typically standing in this section of top mid, red car bubble should be the spawn point. But if I throw a nade into red car bubble and that nade blows up during the time that somebody should be spawning, that player will no longer spawn there. They're going to spawn somewhere else. Maybe blue car bubble, potentially red. I feel like red because it's an open window. There's a better chance that they're going to spawn in the blue car bubble instead where it's complete cover. So the spawn system just tries to pick somewhere else that's safe, that's a similar distance away. If I'm shooting into blue base, and blue base is the farthest distance from me, it's probably going to send that spawn over to car bubble instead. So where you're nading, where you're shooting, if you're shooting and nading at the time of a spawn, then it's going to block that spawn point, send that player somewhere else that the game thinks is equally as safe or, as safe as possible. The third criteria is line of sight. Now, line of sight's an interesting one because it's hard to tell how much it influences your opponent's spawn exactly. One thing I know for sure is that if you have a direct line of sight, so if you're directly looking in your opponent's spawn, your opponent will never spawn there. The game makes a note to never spawn an opponent directly inside your reticle or directly in your line of sight. This is a little different than past Halo titles like Halo 3, for example. This is just a random clip I grabbed on YouTube. But in Halo 3, your opponent can spawn directly inside your reticle, which this has positives and negatives to it. And here's an example right here. Your opponent spawns directly where you're looking. And of course, there's a skill associated with hitting these shots, reacting and hitting precise spawn kills. But at the same time, the guy who spawns in your reticle has no option but to die. They can't really do anything to avoid this. So you could argue that this is unfair or maybe poor game design, but at the same time, back in the day, in classic Halo, these types of kills were considered as a reward for good positioning, good map control. If you control the map, you're rewarded with easier kills, kind of like a chess game. So anyway, it's an interesting discussion topic, maybe for another time. But in Halo 5, it's not like that. If you have a direct line of sight on that spawn, your opponent will never spawn inside your reticle. However, if I remove that line of sight, but I'm still looking at the spawn point, now the spawn point is open again. An opponent could spawn here, and I can end up walking in and then seeing them as they spawn. A good example of that is this spawn strat. It's used in competitive 1v1s and 2v2s on Truth. It's a way for me to force a spawn in the back of the base if I perfectly time my walk up through bottom mid into top mid. Now, if I time this frame perfectly, I can actually see that person spawn in the back of the base. And I'll do this over and over again just so you can see it happening consistently. But I can force a spawn in the back of the base. And once again, if I time it perfectly, I'll actually see a little bit of that spawn happen.
Perfect kill. That's the match.
It's very powerful because not only is it forcing that consistent spawn, that player who spawns in the back of the base has no cover. So you get like a nice early line of sight on them, and you can usually outshoot them or force them to back down right away. So it's a pretty good way to start that new gunfight, especially in 1v1s and 2v2s. So how does it work? Well, you have to set it up. There's two things you got to pay attention to. One is the kill feed, and second, your position. So the kill feed on the left-hand side of the screen here, note that in all competitive game types in Halo 5, the spawn timer is 8 seconds. Cool fact about the kill feed is when you get a kill, that feed stays there for 5 seconds. The moment that it disappears, there's 3 seconds left until that player spawns up. So it works as a great timer setting up this play here. What you want to do is stand beside this peg, and I'm standing beside the peg closer to the car side and not the pink side. I've tried this on pink side, and it works, but it's way harder to get it to work on pink side than it is on car, and I think the reason for that is because there's two very prevalent spawn points here. There's the red base and there's the red side car bubble. If I'm coming in from car side, then I'm taking influence, at least I think, I'm taking influence away from that car side bubble and placing more influence on red, as opposed to if I'm coming from the pink side, it's placing more influence on that car bubble. So there's a better chance that if I mistime it, that player's going to spawn in the car bubble instead of back of red. So if I start from car side and stand beside this peg and then wait, if you wait until this kill feed disappears, the moment it disappears, so you get 3 seconds, you time that walk up. So you see it disappear, and then I start walking, and it just seems to work. The timing seems to work out. So that's how I've been doing it. I stand beside the peg, wait for the kill feed to disappear, walk up, and it seems to work every time. You want to make sure it's from the car side. Once again, I've tried it from pink side, and I'll show an example from pink side as well. Right here, I'm on pink side. I wait for the kill feed to disappear and then walk up. And I think it is possible to line it up and still get the spawn in the back of the base, but more often than not, I end up getting a spawn in red side car bubble. And I think that's because the car bubble spawn is farther away, so there's more influence placed on that spawn than the back base. And in case you're wondering why, if I'm walking in from car side, does my opponent not spawn on the pink side instead of back base, like what happens in the opposite scenario? If I'm walking up from pink, they spawn in car bubble. That's a great question. I'm actually not sure. My only answer that I can think of is I think that some spawn points or individual spawn points have their own priority weights associated with them. And I think that car bubble and back base have a higher priority than the pink side spawn. I'm not actually really sure. I'm also not really sure how line of sight affects spawn either. This is where things get a little complex because I'm confident that the direction you're looking does influence your opponent's spawn. Even if something is obstructing the view of the spawn, the direction you're looking still influences that spawn, just to a lesser degree. I just don't know what degree it influences it. And I tried running some tests here. I go to P3 here, and then I look at blue car bubble, and all things considered, what I'm expecting here is a red car bubble spawn. I'm also looking at blue, which should take influence off of blue. And that's exactly what happens. I get a red car bubble spawn, which is great. Things worked as planned. But things get a little weird and different here when I go to the other side on P3. I'm on red side, and I don't know if the position that I'm standing on P3 changes this. I'm sure this is a factor as well, but I'm on P3 red side, and now I'm looking at red base instead, and I end up getting a red car bubble spawn, which is interesting. This kind of makes sense. I'm looking at red car bubble is still very far away from this location on P3, so I feel like it's kind of a toss-up between blue and red car bubble, so not as bad, but then I decide to look at red car bubble while standing on P3. Once again, I don't know if it's the spot on P3 that I'm standing that's affecting this, but I'm looking at the bubble, and my opponent still spawns in red car bubble, even though I'm looking at red car. So this I found a little confusing. I don't know if it has to do with the spot that I'm standing, the direction I'm looking, whatever it is. Then I decide to walk forward. So I'm still on P3, still looking at red car, and I'm now walked forward. I'm in a different position slightly, and I get a totally different spawn. I end up getting a back blue base spawn, which was also unexpected. So I'm not 100% sure what's creating these results, and I'm open to theories in the comments if you guys have them, but generally what you should follow for spawns is that your opponent's going to spawn the farthest distance away from where you and your teammates are, where there's no nades and gunfire and no direct lines of sight. Okay, so I got a little carried away talking about spawns, and now this is going to be a very long video, of course, but let's try to take that new knowledge and apply it to this Truth CTF game. Now, quick refresher for those who haven't seen it, or even if you have seen it, this red team lands a perfect opening strat against blue team. They take out all 4 players, all 4 of them stay alive as well. They send 1 through car, 1 through window, 2 through pink. They stay alive, they win their fights, and the team's objective here is to run a flag through the pink side of the map. Now, pink side is generally the safest, most approachable lane to run your flag through, though you can run through window, you can run through car as well. All of them can work, but I think the reason why teams go for pink is because the car bubble is a pretty high priority spawn point, and it's easier to lock down. Now, I recorded footage breaking down this run and the next and the ones that follow last week, so I'm going to send you back in time to that footage. If you want to safely run a flag through the pink side of the map, then ideally you want to make sure that none of your opponents spawn anywhere near pink side to stop you. Instead, you'd want them to spawn somewhere farther away, like the car bubble. Now, to force a car bubble spawn, the first step is to make sure that none of your teammates are anywhere near that spawn point, and that's exactly what happens with Super CC. When he challenges top mid, he dives down to bottom mid, turns around, gets the team fire with his teammate for that kill, and that's 4 dead, and he has the option to go to car. Right now, he could very easily walk into car, go up to car bubble if he wants to, but if he does that, he'll block the spawn point. So instead, he knows to rotate through bottom mid up to top mid, and he ends up doubling up with his teammate on top mid. Now, making sure that your team stays away from that car bubble spawn point is one way to ensure that your opponents will spawn there. But if you want to guarantee that your opponents will spawn in car, you need to make sure that your team is also blocking the other spawn points. Now, pink side spawn usually isn't very difficult to block. Simply by walking through it, you'll be blocking pink, and there's a red player currently walking through pink right now, blocking it. The moment somebody goes into top blue to grab flag, they're very clearly blocking the top blue spawn as well. But bottom blue is a very prevalent spawn point. Even with somebody standing on pink side and somebody in top blue, there's still a possibility that a player can spawn in the bottom of the base in bottom blue. Usually what happens is it's a split spawner. So one guy spawns there by himself and the rest spawn up in car bubble. If you want to ensure this doesn't happen, you need to have the awareness to block that spawn point. And that's exactly what Firebird does here. His timing is actually exceptional. You'll see if I kind of slow-mo this. The player spawns in bottom blue the moment before he sees him, moment before he has an angle on bottom blue. So right there, right before he gets into bottom blue, he gets a split spawner. This is Precisionite, who spawns up in the bottom of the base. So his decision to go under base while his teammate was grabbing flag was very intelligent here, because he ends up getting this perfect surprise attack on Precisionite the moment he split spawns in bottom blue. And now that he's here, this is a guaranteed bubble spawn. There's nowhere else that anyone can be spawning pretty much on the map at this point except in car bubble. So we have Firebird with the camo in the base, blocking these spawns. You got APMH, who's already running that flag out pink side, and then two players up on top mid. These two players are aware of the fact that that car bubble spawn is open. And these players on car, they only really have two options here. They can spawn up on car and try to fly through car side to overextend to cut off the flag carrier, or they go back to their base to get defensive kills and try to regain map control. Now, that means that if red team wants to capture a flag and set themselves up for a second capture, they kind of have two dilemmas to worry about. They have to block players from overextending, and they have to continue to apply pressure to the base and win fights in the base, so they have an option for a second flagpole. And they do this extremely well by cycling out control of top mid and applying pressure to both areas at the same time. And Super CC, his focus is to watch players flying from car back to the base, which he does. He notices a player goes to the base and he decides to dive into the base to get the cutoff and take out that player in blue. Slinky, who's also on top mid at this moment, notices that Super CC decides to dive into the enemy base, and instead of going with them, he decides to stay top mid and focus on the car cutoff. So they're blocking both lanes at the same time. So Slinky's defending car from top mid, while Super CC is diving into the blue base to keep up the pressure on blue, and APMH is just about to cap that flag. So watch how this lines up. The moment that APMH goes in to cap that flag, Super CC wins his fight. He's waiting to pick up the new flag, which he does. He grabs it. Slinky dies on top mid, but APMH wastes no time going from flag capture to thrust slide out to top mid to take his place to keep the pressure up. All well, Super CC runs that flag out through pink side. So what you basically get is this cycle of control through top mid, where you get two players that push up to top mid here. They double up on top mid. You got one player running out the flag through pink side, and then Super CC dives off top mid into blue base. That other player stays behind for the defense. The moment he caps that flag and that player dies, the player who capped flag dives to top mid to regain control of top mid while that second player runs the flag out. And as long as they can keep up that pressure and that control, you get two flag caps in less than 1 minute. Now, this might all seem kind of overwhelming if you're blue team in this situation, but this is definitely counterable. You just have to be very decisive and coordinated with your response. Now, this is the very first life here. Shady goes down. His teammate dies as well. He can see this before he spawns, that they're about to pull his flag. So the moment that he spawns up here in car bubble, he decides to turn and go for defense on this flag. And maybe this will work. You know, it might have worked. He might have got the defense, and that would have been fine. But it doesn't work. What he could have done instead is he could have spawned and known that that flag was going to be pulled and decided to instead start overextending earlier. As that first spawner, it would have been very important for him to start overextending earlier. That could have completely changed the entire play here. He could have gotten control into the red base and maybe even fought for top mid before Super CC made his rotation to top mid. He would have had a 1v1 with this player, so different things could have happened here. And that's not just Shady, right? It's Sika, who spawns up, also is a little indecisive. He's going for a defensive play here as well, but he could be overextending here. The flag's already out on P1. He could try to thrust slide and beat the nade explosion to car 2, or try to get through car 1. Or if he's going to go for defense and make sure that they slay out the base, then he could slow play this as well. He kind of dives into the base with a thrust slide, tries to get defense on the toilet, doesn't even think about top mid, and gets crossed up from top mid as he flies into blue base. So if his objective is to play defensive, then he can slow play the defense around the car door and make sure that he's got an isolated angle and he doesn't get crossed up for free. So many different things could have changed here, and I'm not going to go into all of them. I mean, I was going to try to look at everything, but my videos are so damn long, and I'm not sure how many of you actually stick around past that 20-minute mark. But real quick, though, basically they recreate the same situation for the third cap, and it starts with Firebird, who recognizes that they got 2 slays on the kill feed. So there was one Shady and then Sika right now who just went down, and another one on Precision Knight, and he decides that with these players dead, he has timing to throw himself across bottom mid to get under the base, which is a huge play from Firebird because he speeds up timing. He completely puts himself back into blue base to keep up that pressure, and he ends up taking the attention of, I believe this is Legend, who falls down to bottom mid. Now APMH, who spawned up, saw Firebird flying across the map, taking advantage of that time where the opponents were on spawn, and APMH decided to follow him through bottom mid. Legend, going for this risky play, ended up having him get pinched, and he gets taken out, while his teammates go up through pink side. Right? And one of the big things to notice here is Slinky, who's in P2, sees his teammates going up through pink side and then changes his mind and recognizes exactly what's happening here. He knows his teammates are in blue and they're trying to force a car bubble spawn. So Slinky, just like last life, decides to move back to top mid to start getting the cutoff. So you can tell this team knows exactly what they're trying to do here. They're forcing car bubble. They got a player in position for a cutoff. They can get that flag pull, and then you'll see how everybody kind of changes their positions to adapt here. Slinky realizes he has the freedom to not only go to top mid, he takes an extra step and he flies over to the other car bubble, and now he's waiting here as a line of defense. And then you have Super CC, who recognized that he was in the bottom of the base. He decides to change his position, go back up to top mid and hold down the top mid lane while that flag is coming through. So it's just excellent coordination and their ability to take advantage of those slays and use that timing to get back into the base and grab another flag. All right, that's it for today. A very comprehensive look at the spawn system in Halo 5. Honestly, that's most of my knowledge of Halo 5 spawns, so hopefully if you're somebody who doesn't know much about the spawns, you know a lot more now. What do you think of the spawn system in Halo 5, by the way? Do you think it's consistent? Do you think it's reliable? Did you prefer the Halo 3 style spawns? How do you think the spawns should be in Infinite? Let me know your theories about spawns, and whatever else you want to let me know in the comments, feel free to do so. If you guys want more related videos, make sure to subscribe right above and check out the videos on my right. Plenty more Halo content for you there. And until then, I'll see you in the next one.